Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Challenger Network News. We are here today to discuss why business transformation should be brand-led. So this has not been the traditional approach that's been taken in the market, but we're gonna discuss it and maybe debate it a little bit today. And we are fortunate enough today to have Axel with us from E.ON. He is this SVP of Global Brand and Marketing. And I'm Lakshmi Reddy, a partner here at Elixir. So Axel, welcome. Welcome here. I know I'm going to just give a quick introduction to Axel and E.ON, just to make sure that everybody's familiar, Axel, with the fact that E.ON, it's an international energy company with over 33 million customers in over 30 markets around the world. You are one of the world's largest investor-owned power and gas companies, and employ over 79,000 people globally. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, we are now focusing on Europe, but first of all, thanks for the invite. Happy to be here. Yeah, we are one of the largest energy companies in Europe, 50 million customers. In fact, we have grown a bit, so happy to serve a lot of people across the continent.
That's great. That's great. So today we're going to really explore this topic, and I'm really looking forward to it because from my perspective, it is a transition. And as a marketing executive who's been in marketing for years, I've started seeing this shift, and it'll be interesting to hear what your experience is in this area and thoughts.
So thanks for raising the question. And when you approached me with that question, why business transformation should be brand-led, I had to think back a couple of years when I was working in a different company, and there was a big strategy transformation process, the typical one accompanied by a big international consulting firm. I don't disclose the name now, but it comes down to only a handful. And I recall a situation where we had all the top leadership executives in one big room, and a big strategy presentation started. It was the typical consulting slides, 8-point font size, 150 slides or something. And after 20 minutes, the first people took out their smartphones and started playing, going a bit on LinkedIn, Googling stuff, doing private stuff. I was sitting in the back end of the room, and I could see that actually. And that told me something might not be right with the approach. It is very much targeted to the head, to the ratio. But what about the heart and the guts? How do you make people move? The traditional approach is making people think. Why is it important? What are we going to do? What is the rollout plan? Gantt charts, and so on and so forth. But how do you get them emotionally attached? And I think brand can play a crucial role here, because it's something that makes the identity of a company, the core of it, the raison d'être. It makes it emotional. It brings some heart to it. At least it can bring some heart to it. And if we can leverage that for a company transformation, it becomes a very integrated process, in fact.
And that's a really good point about the meaning that you had. So I'm gonna pose a question that's a bit of a challenge to you. I guess energy is in the grand scheme of things not the sexiest category in the entire world. So generally it's a low interest category that, and often people think of a company that's just kind of somewhere invisible somewhere, and energy is just coming out of the socket. They don't necessarily think about it as a brand or think about engaging with their energy company. So how are you handling that challenge? How is E.ON handling that challenge? Because it is quite a challenge.
It is, and thanks for your politeness. As a German, I can be more forthright with that one. So people don't give a damn about energy. Before I joined E.ON, I didn't really know who my energy provider was, and I didn't care. This is quite a normal thing. It's energy, something that comes out of the socket. Usually people deal with energy around 10 minutes per year. Think about that. That's really a low interest category, usually when the bill comes and these kind of things. Which is a bit counterintuitive if you think about it, because if we think about one of the biggest mega trends of our time, climate change, energy is and used to be part of the problem, but now it's also key for the solution of the whole thing. So it could be and can be a topic that is highly relevant to people. The question is, how do you tell that story? How do you make it relevant in a commodity space where people think, oh, it's coming out of the socket and that's that? We see a bit of a shift coming with things like e-mobility, solar panels on consumers' roofs, and these kind of things. That is already make a difference, because the energy, how I consume it, how I get it, that is something that becomes more tangible. I mean, if you have an EV, an electric vehicle, you have to charge it from time to time. So you actually are a bit closer to energy. We try at E.ON to make it tangible via telling stories about people, and not so much about technology and not so much about infrastructure topics. Most energy companies, the one I work for included, come from a space where had been engineering dominated, a lot of technical terms, and we try to bring that now down to stories that are tangible for people. We have one project at E.ON where we made a little village in Sweden energy independent. So they're running on their own renewable energy, and they can be plugged off the energy grid. And we tell these stories with the great people living in this village, like the blacksmith, who is really quite a character in the English sense of quite a character, and listening to these people telling the story from their point of view with their language, that makes it tangible, and then yes, also emotional, and we can also see that in our measurement.
Mm-hmm. And measurement is a really good point. So you saw a response to that, and so is that the type of thing that you're doing more? Like, what kind of response did you see? Like, so were you going from different messaging before that, or was that kind of your initial foray into, let's start storytelling, let's start like really helping to figure out what that connectivity is between energy and everyday life? And what were you doing before that? And what was the change? It would be interesting to see how that measurement kind of, what you saw impacted by measuring it.
So working with data is for us super important, and this is also the reason why I have my own insights and analytics team in my marketing department. And as we are an energy company, we have also a huge service organization, which gives us also a tool, if you will, to get the real vibe, to get the direct feedback from our customers. So we're measuring also NPS, which is an important one in our context. And you really get the great feedback, and you get the really harsh feedback, believe me. So if the bill is wrong and the customer experience is wrong, people tell you in very direct language, which is brilliant, because we can learn from that. And I also can bring some senior managers on their toes in the company by reflecting them with the real feedback. I mean, if somebody tells you that you are as ... then you might have a problem. So that's a great source. Our challenge is a transformation story, I would say. E.ON started off as a classical utility company with nuclear power stations, coal power stations, and all that kind of stuff. We have divested all of that. So we are a rare animal of one of the biggest energy companies not producing energy. Actually, we distribute it. We have 1.6 million kilometers of grid networks, and we have solutions for the end customer, for B2B, B2M, as we call it, so for communities, cities, city quarters, these kind of things, and really telling the story of, we used to be part of the problem, we have changed, and now something is different. That's the major challenge, because that's, and I can tell you that also from a personal experience, if you talk with people and if I talk with people about the company I work for, that's very often, you with your power stations, it's a bit of a dirty job. Are you sure you want to do this job? Do you feel comfortable working for such a company? I got these questions. Yeah. So that's kind of a journey, and the data we generate from customers and not yet customers, obviously, that helps us to track if we are on the right path. But it is a journey. It will take time, because it's very deeply rooted in people's beliefs that energy companies are, alongside with weapon and others, the bad guys in the world.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you were talking your friends and colleagues when you decided to take this role on. But it sounds like you've taken it on more as a responsibility, and it's interesting to even hear your own story. You weren't really thinking about it, just it was coming from somewhere. But then now you and I think the rest of the world, or a lot of people, are starting to engage more with the sustainability conversation, with trying to understand how each individual is actually participating in sustainability, or really the opposite of, and just taking more. So it seems like you've taken this on more as almost a responsibility, and that seems to be a part of your communication of how that's engaging. So
Yeah.
you've seen some of this storytelling start working of how energy is a part of everyday life. And where are you planning on kind of continuing in that direction and engaging in other areas beyond the big story? Like, are there like social media channels? Are you using different channels to try and engage?
Yes, of course. And if you imagine, our customer base is really broad. I mentioned 50 million. So the channels our customers and not yet customers are using are as diverse as the customer base is. So we have to be on all channels, but you have to make a decision where to start. So we started to start last year with a video on demand format. We call it the Change Makers. It's on YouTube. It's 8 to 10 minutes long videos, and the length in itself tells you something. The question of today is why business transformation should be brand led. In our case, in the energy industry case, the answer to the question is, how do we come to a more sustainable future, to a more sustainable planet? The answer to that is a complicated one. There is no silver bullet. There is not that one single product that can solve everything. So it's a combination of circular economy, it's a combination of green sourcing, of solar, wind, e-mobility, home heating, and so on and so forth. It's quite a complex thing with a lot of interdependencies. And that story is not an easy one to tell. It's a bit of the trick, which we can try to solve now. And in autumn onward, from autumn onwards, you might see a bit more of that in a bit of shorter form from E.ON. But telling this story is an important one. And I think the brand can take an important role here. E.ON is a household name in our markets. We are around for quite some while, and people still question us a bit in terms of, aren't you coming from the old utility world? On the other hand, there is quite some trust and quite some decoding of competence in energy. So people are aware that there comes a lot of experience and competence in energy questions with us. And this is a door opener where a brand can build trust and tell that business transformation story, which is quite fundamental in our case. Think about it, utility that gets rid of all the production, every power station. We still have some nuclear ones, but we will close them in the next month as planned. Getting rid of all of that, changing fundamentally from a polluter to an enabler of a sustainable energy future. That isn't something you can tackle with consulting PowerPoint slides. You need to have that story, and you need to have this credibility in your brand, which also helps to transform the brand itself. And that's a bit the complex environment and nut to crack, I would say.
Yeah, no. Obviously, you are a very well recognized brand, and something that for me I've found that often was the center of our marketing efforts for when I was on the client side, or even with my clients, is really kind of this whole concept that the actual customer is in the middle, and at the end of the day, we're talking about business, brand-led business transformation. I found that the customer is in the middle, and that to me is that connectivity with brand and business, because the customer is going to be in the middle both of those things. And at the end of the day, it's the way the customer buys your service or your product is the business. And I've found more often, and especially I'd say in the past 24 months or so, the business leaders are starting to engage more with marketing and brand. If I think that understanding that and what you're doing, for instance, what you're talking about and educating people. So this concept that the concept that educating a customer, educating an end consumer on what E.ON was and what they are doing now, it seems core to success of the actual business transformation, which is really exciting. Are you finding that that's resonating, or do you think it's going to take a lot more work? How's that evolution going?
We are on our way, I would say. Think about it. We come from a space where we used to be a highly regulated business. In part, we still are. I've worked in my past in healthcare, so I've experienced a bit of regulation in the past, but also in energy. That's the case. And if you think about energy consumption and the energy market itself, also in the consumer space, we used to be quite regulated. And in the past, many energy companies, also the one I work for, used not the word customer, but the word this is a metering point, which is technically correct because as one customer you can have more than one metering point, so metering entry into your house or flat. But well, calling a customer metering point in itself tells you something. So that was the starting point. As a very engineering-driven company, we took, from my point of view, a very good decision in measuring the customer feedback. We use NPS. There are different metrics, but in the end, it matters that you listen to your customers, you listen to what they tell you, and act upon that feedback. And hopefully, what we also do in a very structured way, to first of all increase the basics. You need to have the basics right, otherwise the rest is a problem. And the basics can be getting your bill out accurate, which is not always the case. It's this complex thing. If you think about 50 million customers with different kind of contexts, moving houses, changing consumptions, and so on and so forth, it's a really complex thing. Mistakes happen, bugs are there. You have to deal with that. You need to really deliver on that, on these expectations, and expectations are rising. I mean, you don't have to compare yourself to other energy companies. You have to compare yourself to the experience I get from Spotify or from my Sonos or something like that. That is the basics. And then on top of that, really explain what it is all about. Energy is also a very price sensitive industry. So to be successful in the market, you need to be very careful and very conscious in your pricing, and price value perception is an important aspect here. So what do I get for my money? I mean, if I buy a smartphone, I know this or that brand, that's the benefit I get in energy. You don't see it, you don't smell it, you don't hear it. What do I get from that? And we try to find ways to tell people that, okay, if you are a customer of E.ON, you are buying into a company that makes a bigger contribution to the energy transition towards a sustainable future. That's a bit the basic idea behind, but it's quite some way to go still.
Yeah, it's interesting. Before I ask the next question, I also wanted to remind everybody to submit your questions as well. So we'll be shifting into questions from the audience in a moment. But what you're triggering, I mean, that metering point comment just kind of is sticking with me a little bit. And I think one of the biggest challenges as we're thinking about brand-led transformation is it's not just communicating with that end customer or metering point, but it's also how, if that's the way your organization has been thinking about this for years, is there a component of your role that is not just external branding, but that's really internal branding, internal perception, internal communication?
Excellent question. And I truly believe as a brand person, as a marketing person, you need to think both ways. it's a bit of I'm a bit of the one of the advocates of the customer in the company, together with my team. Obviously, of course, you can't do it alone. I strongly believe so that building a brand from within is an important aspect here. So first of all, educating also your internal colleagues, your folks, about actually what is a brand, what is the concept of a brand. I did that this morning actually. In a meeting with colleagues from another division, really talking about what is a brand, what does the E.ON brand stand for, and how can each and every colleague contribute to building that brand, and also giving a bit of impulses. What does the outside world think? When working in a corporation, you sometimes are a bit caught in the corporate bubble, and breaking up this bubble from time to time, I think it's a very important aspect of our job.